Hi everybody and welcome to the fourth lesson of the CodeGates Python Basics course. In the last lesson we quickly talked about programming languages and also about what actually happens when you execute any given program. That was just to give you some general idea, and now we're going to dive back into Python, and specifically we're going to look at strings, which are one really important part of Python and also of, at least to my knowledge, almost all programming languages that are in widespread use today. So strings you can think of as the second major bit that the language provides you with that we are looking at. The first one we looked at was built-in functions. Now we are onto strings. And here I have the Hello World program, which I believe was the very first thing that I wrote. And this actually includes a string. Namely this thing here, Hello World itself, enclosed in double quotation marks. And specifically it's these double quotation marks which which you as the programmer use to create a string. So you have these double quotation marks, and within them you have something written, like could be Hello World or could be anything else, London, whatever. So what strings actually are on a technical level is they actually are sequences of characters that are held in a sequence. I suppose maybe that's why they're referred to as strings, but I'm not entirely sure here, so as in it's a string of characters. As I said, not sure. A string can include any sort of legitimate character. It can include numbers, it can include special characters like question marks or exclamation marks and so forth. It can also include white spaces, which we saw in the Hello World program too. And white spaces are sort of a little bit like the zero in mathematics, you know, it's a character that denotes the absence of a character in a way, but it's still a thing because otherwise Hello World would always be in a consecutive row. Yes, there's, aside from the double quotation marks, there's one other way to create strings, and that's plainly with single quotation marks. And there's no real fundamental difference. Single or double quotation marks, they're both strings. One thing, however, is that you need to decide whenever you write one particular string whether for that string you're going to use double or single quotation marks. So I think if you mix double and single like this, I'm not sure, you will probably run into trouble, or at the very least it counts as very bad programming style. So for each given string decide double or single. And usually when people actually write real code, they use the same convention throughout the entire code. So single or double is just a personal choice. Now one question is, like, I can explain to you how these strings work and that they are sequences of characters, but in all honesty I think the actual role that they play in programming will only become genuinely apparent to you when you try writing a few programs, and if you also read a few bits of code in different places. It's only through that experience that you come to understand how strings as a thing tie into the entire practice of writing pieces of code. I think that's one thing where you just need to have a little bit of faith that these bits and pieces will fall into place. Now, one thing that gives strings a significance and a relevance is that they come with what's called string methods or string functions. And these are actual functionalities. I'm just going to start by showing you an example. So let's say you have a string, any string you like, let's say United Kingdom, and you have the string, you follow the string with a dot, then you follow with the name of one of these string functions. Let's say we are now going to look at the upper string function, and then you follow with parentheses, opening and closing. Now this is a functionality that comes with strings, which is that this upper string function will take care of turning every character in the string that we're using it on, this United Kingdom string, into its uppercase version. So if we run this program, you can see the hello world from line 2 here being executed, but this was partially to remind you that whenever you want to see something in your output, when you run the program, you have to print it out. So if we print this out, we see United Kingdom all in uppercase. And that's an example of a string function. There's a variety of string functions that come with Python. You don't need to know them all. They all follow this construction of a string, like United Kingdom here, followed by a dot, followed by whatever the name of the string function is, followed by parentheses, and we're also going to see examples where something needs to go in here. Now I'm going to walk you through just 2 or 3 more of these string functions. So upper is relatively self-explanatory. There's also the counterpart. So you have any string, the counterpart is lower. I suppose you could guess what that does. It turns everything into lowercase. So here we have that united in all the lowercase. Now there are some string functions that are a little more programmatic. Like, for instance, there's one called count. Let me just write this so everything is in shape. And count as a string function allows you to count the occurrence of a particular character in a given string. So let's say you have a string, could be anything, let's say bananas, and you want to count how often an n occurs in bananas on A, let's say an A. The way you do that is you call this count string function in the same manner as you've called upper and lower, namely string followed by dot followed by that string function followed by parentheses. And now count, however, needs to know one additional bit of information. Upper and lower know what they're doing. They are just doing the same job every time. But count needs to know what it's supposed to count. And that piece of information goes into these parentheses. And let's say if we want to count how often an A occurs, this is how we would do it. So the result here would be 1, 2, 3 probably. And if we print that out, that shall tell us. Let's see, there's a 3. Now, this construction of passing another piece of information in the parentheses is called passing an argument. And that's just the programming language that people use, the terminology. We are passing an argument to the count function, in our case, which is a string function that we call, another piece of terminology, on the string, in our case, the string bananas. Now, maybe one more example of a string function. Let me think. There's one called replace, and the replace string function allows you to replace a certain character with a different one. So again, it could be used on any string. Let's just use bananas again. We use the replace string function, and now let's say we want to replace all n's, all lowercase n's, with uppercase y's, right? And this is how you would do it. Like replace, like count, needs to know this, what it's supposed to replace, and with what. And that's what we pass into these parentheses. So the first thing we tell replace is what we want to replace, which is a's. And the second thing we tell replace is what we want to replace that with. Let's say uppercase y's. And if we print that out, the outcome of that piece of code, you can see here, you get this thing where all the a's have been replaced with y's. Yeah, so these are string functions. We've seen 4. As I said, there are more and in Python. And I believe, though, to some extent, you don't need to worry about learning too many, because it's good the important thing is to understand how they work, how to invoke them, what can be sort of done with them, and maybe know a few as a sort of base repertoire. But the way in which learning usually happens is that you just pick up different ones over time as you sort of work on a few things or read some other pieces of code. And you sort of gradually improve sort of extend your horizon in that way. So I don't think you should worry about learning all string functions at once by heart. It's not the efficient way to go about this. Yeah, so this is string functions. In the next lesson we're going to look at variables, and those will also be quite important. We're also going to try to look at examples of code relatively quickly, because as I said before, to some extent you only get to understand the role of different pieces of this Python toolbox when you see them in their context. So I'm going to try and come up with a few examples that are good to understand. Alright, I believe that should be it for now, and yeah, see you in the next lesson. Bye bye.